Hello everyone, welcome back to another video on Erit Academy, and today we will have a topic from current affairs for our daily issue analysis. So let's start the discussion. Hope you all had a very good weekend and you would have gone through your notes, you would have revised properly, and if that is the case, then very good. Keep revising, keep learning, and let's start our discussion. So today we have taken this topic of parliamentary reforms, and parliamentary reforms is one of the perennial issue from where question can be asked by UPSC in the mains, and it is one of the potential area every year. And since it was in news, so it makes it further more relevant. So why it was in news? It was in news because there was a panel headed by former General Secretary and advisor of Rajya Sabha, Dr. PPK Ramacharyulu. So a panel was formed, and the panel was constituted by Vice President, that is Chairman of Rajya Sabha, Venkaiah Naidu, in January this year. So this panel has submitted extensive report, and they have studied the working of Rajya Sabha Secretariat, how this Sabha Secretariat functions, and other procedural issues, and thus they have come up with around 130 recommendations. Okay, so they have recommended about a tenure of parliamentary committees. So they have suggested that the tenure of parliamentary committees should be increased from present it is 1 year to 2 years. It should be increased, and it is also suggesting that there should be committee R, a dedicated committee R should be there, because whenever any report is prepared, lot of discussion, deliberates, and efforts will be made in the preparation of that debate, and such reports will have uh, certain implication as well. So they have recommended, the panel has recommended that there should be a committee report, dedicated committee report, so that they can discuss selected major reports in the parliament for wider amplification of the content of the reports, that how beneficial it will be. So there this committee, this panel is recommending that a dedicated R or dedicated committee R should be there for during the Rajya Sabha proceedings to discuss the import and implications of the reports, okay, which has been finalized by parliamentary standing committees. So this is what has been recommended. Not only that, the panel is also recommending that the reports should be made more accessible and to the stakeholders and general public. So accessibility of reports has been highlighted. So this is very important if we talk about democracy, maturity of the democracy. If we talk about the parliamentary functioning, then these recommendations make it very important. So be it tenure of the parliamentary committees from 1 year to 2 year, or dedicated committee are to in order to discuss the reports which has been finalized by the parliamentary standing committee, or accessibility of the reports. All these three recommendations, if you consider, which is there in front of you, so these three recommendations make it very important. Why? Because it is going to make our democracy, the whole process, more vibrant and more mature. So that's why it is important. Let's discuss another issue, other issues and parliamentary reforms. So other parliamentary reforms, if we analyze, so parliamentary sittings, if we will analyze from that point of view. So before that, we all read in polity, and in general, we have our understanding about the importance of the parliament. So parliament is important for debates, discussion, passing of laws, scrutinizing government policies. Basically, parliament is there to put a check on the executives, on the government, how the policies are being implemented, how they are being formed, or approving government expenditure, representing the interest of the people. So that is the primary role, importance of the parliament and the representatives. So for that, what is required? Parliamentary sitting is required. They need to meet. So let's analyze it. So analysis wise, if we analyze the data, so over the years there has been decline in the average sitting days of the parliament. So in earlier days, Lok Sabha met at the average rate of 130 days. Average number of days they used to meet in 1950s was 130 days in a year during 1950s, and these sittings have come down to 70 days in 2000s. So that is the status. A lot of disruption is happening. Parliament is members are not sitting together and analyzing. So the average sitting, the number of days has reduced. Okay, so now if this implies what, the meaning is that the business to transact less business, they are transacting less business, they are discussing less issues. Whatever we analyzed, about debate, discussion, policy, scrutiny, or representing interest of the people. So when you are not meeting, then how you will represent it, right? So in order to put a check or for correction, we had a committee, National Commission on Working of Constitution, NCRCW. So they recommended that Lok Sabha should have at least 120 days meetings or sittings in a year, and while Rajya Sabha should have 100 sittings in a year. So this is a recommendation. So what we are doing today, we are analyzing the issue. At the same time, we are discussing the recommendations, and we are also discussing the best practices. So some countries like United Kingdom and Australia, they have an annual calendar. So they release an annual calendar of sittings at the beginning of the year itself. So how good it is. It is such a good mechanism of transparency and accountability that in the starting of the year itself, the countries like UK and Australia, they are releasing the calendar. Even people are aware of that. Okay, when these meetings are going to happen, so they will be also on their toes. The representatives will be also on their toes. So it is such a healthy environment. So this is one of the best practice which we can incorporate. So what we have done today, we have taken the issue of the parliamentary sitting, we have analyzed the issue, then we have discussed the NCRCW recommendation and the best practices. So this is how we are going to discuss today. Okay, let's analyze other reforms. Next issue of parliamentary reforms is related to resorting to ordinance routes. That is the use of ordinance route in order to pass laws, in order to take decisions. So the number of ordinances that were promulgated has reduced. So there is in general reduction. So this observation is there that in 10th Lok Sabha, around 77 ordinances were passed. It has been reduced to 25 ordinances in 15th Lok Sabha. Okay. However, the number has been reduced. The instances when ordinances were passed or the ordinance route was taken, it has reduced. But there have been instances when ordinances have lapsed as they have not been approved by Parliament. In fact, in some of these cases, the government has re-promulgated the lapsed ordinances. So repeated promulgation has also happened. For example, if we analyze, so we have this the enemy property amendment ordinance, and it was promulgated 4 times, and an ordinance related to land acquisition has been promulgated thrice. So this also shows that how many times the repetition is happening, the promulgations are being repeated again and again. So this is another observation with respect to, and with the help of examples we have seen. Not only that, related to these ordinance, what is the recommendation and observation of Supreme Court? So let's understand that. So recommendation related to it, Supreme Court told that in 1986, then Supreme Court's judgment in 1986 observed that the power to promulgate ordinance is meant to be used only in extraordinary circumstances, and this should not be seen as a substitute for the law-making powers of the legislature. In fact, countries like United States, Canada, Australia do not vest the similar legislative power in the government. So this is also one of the observations. So Supreme Court has given a judgment that it should be done in extraordinary circumstances only. Another issue which we are going to analyze the another reform is related to the accountability of regulators. So we know that there are various regulators established by Parliament to regulate the competitions or set standards in different sectors. So these regulators, though independent in their functioning, these regulators are branch of executive only, and thus they are their performance or they are accountable to Parliament. Okay, so they have their accountability to Parliament. Typically, they are required to present their annual reports to Parliament, but these reports, whatever they are submitting, is rarely discussed. Okay, and the functioning of the regulator is also scrutinized in question hour. However, any questions surrounding to their functioning are answered by concerned ministers and not by the regulators themselves. So these answers are being given by the ministers, not regulators. So that presentation, the authenticity, or for that matter, you can say the actual analysis or the accountability, when we are telling that accountability is not fixed, is not being fixed on the regulators, rather minister is taking the responsibility. Okay, so this is one aspect of analysis. Not only that, the regulators, they are also accountable to the parliamentary committees, because parliamentary committees also examine the performance of the regulators. For example, we have a standing committee on health, which is examining the functioning of regulators like Medical Council of India. Then we have a standing committee on energy, which is currently examining the role of regulators in power sectors. So while a committee can summon the regulator to before them to depose before them, these interactions are not regular. So this interaction should happen, but this interaction is not regular. Okay, so this is another problem. Accountability is there, but the interaction is not happening on regular basis. So what best practice we have? So countries like UK, the regulators are frequently called to appear before Parliament. So this is from United Kingdom. Even US, the this example of is there. So the officers of Bank of England, they appear regularly before the Treasury Committee of the House of Commons. So this is the practice there in UK. In US also, the Federal Reserve, they are required to send their semi-annual reports to banking committees of both the houses. So this is one of the practice which they are following. Okay, so the representative of the Bank of England, they need to appear before the Treasury Committee. So this their interaction is happening regularly. In USA, we discussed the Federal Reserve Committee is supposed to send semi-annual reports, means semi-annual. Okay, so again the frequency of interaction is better there. Okay, so this is how it should be. Let's analyze the other issues. We know that question hour is very important tool, very effective tool for parliamentary accountability. And during question hours, MP pose questions to ministers to hold executive accountable for implementing laws, policies. There are a start question, unstart questions. So unstart questions, you read in Lakshmikant that we need a written reply is required. Start questions for them, oral answers are to be given by the concerned ministers. So MPs are allowed to even ask the follow-up questions to the minister based on the answer. So what is happening in this regard? So if we analyze the disruption with respect to the disruption in 16th Lok Sabha, the question hour has functioned in 16th Lok Sabha for 82% of the scheduled time, while in Rajya Sabha it has functioned for 43%. So this lower rate of functioning may reflect that the time lost due to disruption, which has reduced even the number of questions that may be answered orally. So if there is disruption in the question hour, means the question which could be asked orally, that has got affected. While the parliament could have found any alternative of sitting for extra hours to transact other business, time lost during question hour, but no such arrangements have been made. So currently, there the problem is with respect to accountability, that no arrangements has been made, that whatever time we have lost, is there any other alternative to that? Because of disruptions, we have lost that time, but no accountability is there. No alternative arrangements is there. Not only that, currently there is no mechanism for answering questions which require interministerial expertise or related to the broader government policies. So no such accountability mechanisms are there. And we know that Prime Minister in India, they do not answer questions other than the ones pertaining to their own ministries, his ministries, right? Such questions may either may not get adequately addressed or remain unanswered. So what is the best practice here? The best practice is from United Kingdom. In UK, we have the Prime Minister's question time, which is conducted on weekly basis, and it is a time of 30 minutes. So during this 30 minutes, the Prime Minister answer questions posed by various MPs, and these questions will be related to broader government policies, engagement, and issues affecting the countries. So this is how the question hours can be improved or can be made effective, and this is very important tool of accountability. So this is another reform where the potential lies. The other area of reform which is required is related to scrutiny. So we need to improve our scrutiny process. To improve the government scrutiny process, if we talk about the tools, the first tool is related to opposition. So we know the opposition plays very important role in holding the government, the executives accountable, and that cannot be this fact or this the importance cannot be undermined. So the role of opposition, if we analyze in case of India, it is in minority, and we are struggling with this issue of leader of opposition, appointment of leader of opposition, and because of that, many things are on hold also. So we are struggling with that, and opposition here is in minority. So to improve the government accountability in parliament, the opposition in some countries like United Kingdom, Canada, Australia is very good, and they form a shadow cabinet. So there is no shadow cabinet like concept in India. In this concept, that shadow cabinet concept, what happens in such system, opposition MPs, they track a certain portfolio, they scrutinize its performance, and they suggest alternative programs. So this allows for a detailed tracking and scrutiny of ministers and assist MPs in making constructive suggestion. So in our case, what is happening, opposition, they always are busy with fault finding. They're not cooperating. They have this potential of analyzing intellectually and evidence based policy making. They can suggest best practices, what can work, what cannot work, so they can become part of the government. So that's why this word is there, shadow cabinet. But yeah, we should learn from the countries like United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia. Not only that, if we analyze the scrutiny aspect with respect to agenda of the parliament, so parliament has the agenda should be designed in such a manner that parliament itself is becoming a tool for scrutinizing everything. So we have this concept of whip. So 13th whip, all India whips conference was held, and they recommended that opposition parties should be given more space to place their agenda on the floor of the house, right? So 13th whips conference highlighted that whenever this agenda of the parliament is being decided, even opposition parties should be given a space where they can present their place their agenda on the floor. At a separate time could be set aside each week for opposition parties to set agendas. So this is one of the very good recommendation where the opposition parties can also have a dedicated time, and they can also place their agenda. They can also discuss. But yes, for that we need to have mature democracy. Our parliamentarians, we have seen how they fight in the parliament, how they just walk away in the parliament from the parliamentary discussions and debates. So here comes the international best practices from United Kingdom we have. So in United Kingdom, the parliament, it allows the opposition parties to determine the agenda for 20 days of each session of the parliament. Okay, and Canada for 22 days. But in our case, at present in India, the business advisory committee is there, which is setting up the agenda of the parliament, and the ruling party has a greater say in deciding the agenda. Okay, so business advisory committee in case of India. What we can learn from UK, that we have the opposition parties should be allowed to determine the agenda for the 20 days of each session in the parliament. So this is what we can learn. Let's analyze the other reform. Another tool or the area of reform which is a potential area is related to the parliamentary committees, the role of parliamentary committees. So we know that parliamentary committees are responsible for scrutinizing the action of the governments, and we also know that parliament has limited time to discuss a legislation or any issue. So there comes the importance or the role of parliamentary committees, because parliamentary committees provide a forum or a platform where detailed scrutiny and deliberation can be done. Okay, so parliamentary standing committees, what is the role? They examine the bills, refer to them, demand for the grants of the ministries or any other subject. So parliament has, we also know the parliament has three financial committees which can examine the government expenditure, whether they conform to its budgetary estimates or not. So be it a scrutiny of the bill or demand for grants, that is the importance of parliamentary committee. It is very important tool, and if we go by this process, definitely it will lead to more good results or better results. But what is the status if we analyze the trend? So in 16th Lok Sabha, 33% of the bills were introduced in parliament which have been referred to a committee. Only 33% of bills were referred to committee which were introduced in the parliament, which is low when we compare to earlier Lok Sabha. So earlier 70% of the bills were referred to the committees. Okay, and if we have to take a recommendation from the best practices, if we have to take some example, Then we have example of United Kingdom again. So in countries like UK, bills are mandatorily referred to committees of both the houses of the parliaments, and these committees have the power to amend bills. However, their amendments may be overturned by MPs during the discussion. That is another issue. But yeah, they have this power. In our case, this recommendation by NCRCW was also there. They also recommended that all bills should be referred to the committees. So yes, we should follow it. It is one of the potential area of reform. Over the years, the financial accountability has become very important. It is very important role of the legislator to put a check on the executive, and thus financial accountability of the government is very important. So over the years, the time is spent by Parliament on the discussion of the general budget, which even include the discussion of demand for grants, has reduced. So if we analyze it, then we have data in front of us that how it has reduced from 135 hours in 1985 to 44 hours in 2016. As a result, what has happened? 10% of the total budget is only discussed in most of the years. And further, if we analyze the reports of the committees, so what happens? There have been instances when the reports by these parliamentary committees are presented either after the demands on the grants has been discussed or the day of the passage it will be introduced. And then what will be the efficacy, what will be the importance of the scrutiny or analysis of the by the parliamentary committees? It will be meaningless because for example, let's understand it with the standing committee report on demand for grants on northeastern region. So this report by standing committee in 2016 was presented on the day of the discussion. Now you only think from your side, would it be possible for any MP discussing the demands that they would have gone or they would have given sufficient time to study the committee's recommendation? No. In addition to that, scrutiny of individual demands by standing committee or the financial committee also goes to PSC and EC, that is Estimate Committee and Public Committee. So we have other standing committees and we have financial committees. The reports are going to PSC and EC. So they are also submitting their report. They are also examining whether the funds have been spent as estimated at the time of approval or sanction for the sanction purpose or not. But the problem is these reports which are submitted, which have been given by the financial committees, are rarely being discussed in the parliament. So reports on committees, either they are being presented on the day or after the passage, after the discussion. Budget discussion time has reduced. Financial committees reports are there, but these reports are rarely being discussed in the parliament. Then how we are enforcing financial accountability? The parliamentary committees are there, but their reports are not being discussed in the sufficient manner or sufficient time is being not given. So thus it is making the whole process mockery of the whole process. Okay, so this is one aspect of another parliamentary reform. Another area with respect to parliamentary reforms is with respect to discussions on the bills. So we know discussion on any bill is very important, and that is the whole sole purpose of any Vidhan Sabha or the state legislative assembly, council, or Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. So we will understand it with the help of example of Haryana Assembly. So the duration of this 12th term of Haryana's assembly, that was 2009 to 14, it was this session, if we analyze, was for only 11 days per year on an average. Okay, and within that also the budget session occupied 70% of the total session time. Okay, and in the remaining time the state assembly passed 129 bills, all of which were passed on the same day. The day they were introduced. Now, if that is the status, they are meeting on an average for 11 days in every year per year, and on the same day, if the bills has been introduced and 129 bills were passed on, then what kind of discussion or what kind of deliberation is happening in the assemblies? Duration itself is telling, the data itself is telling that they are not sitting, they are not analyzing. Then what kind of discussion on the bills will happen? Okay, so that is one of the problem. If we analyze from the private members point of view, so in India in this 7 decade, in the 7 decade, only in this long history as a republic, only 14 private members will have bills have been turned into enforceable codes. Okay, so that is another problem. We have already discussed this issue of anti-defection law. If you have not gone through the video, go through the playlist. The video is there, and we have discussed in detail. It was also in news because of the Maharashtra issue, and we have covered it in detail. This is one potential topic itself. So if we analyze with respect to anti-defection law, so we have covered it, but we there we saw that how it is diluting the representative democracy. There, no fair discussion is happening on the bills because of the party whip. MPs, they don't have their own independent viewpoint. MLAs, they don't have their own viewpoint. So it is diluting the representative democracy itself. Okay, so with respect to discussion of bills, these areas you should remember whenever you are analyzing the issue. With respect to another aspect of parliamentary reforms, we have another area is that is of women representation. So representation of women is very important because we know that around 48 to 49% of the population is of women only. And when we talk about gender equality, then why not in the parliament? So there has to be women representation. But if we analyze the representation, so poor representation is there, and the political power is male dominated only. The Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, in total together, they have not seen women MPs cross 14% mark. So if you want to know the exact data, then in 17th Lok Sabha we have 14.4% of representation of women. However, the first Lok Sabha was having 4.4%. So in that case, yes, improvement has happened. But in 70 years, just 10% increment. However, the global average is 23%. So if we analyze with the global average also, we are not up to the mark. Okay, so we are lacking, and poor representation is there. So think from that point of view. If we analyze the statistics in other way, then India ranked in 2012, that is 2012, India ranked 20th from the bottom in terms of representation of women in parliament. And if we analyze the status of the state assemblies, so women constitute less than 10% of the assemblies in Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Assam, Kerala, Puducherry. So these states, less than 10% representation is there. So this needs to be changed. So what we should do, the way forward you can talk about is with respect to women reservation bill, that is 108 amendment, which is talking about reserving 33% of the seats in parliament and state legislatures for women. We have already done this 33% reservation of seats for women in PRIs and ULPs through our 73rd and 74th Amendment Act. So time has come when we should also talk about that reservation in Parliament. So we have already a bill, women reservation bill is there, 108th Amendment bill is there. So it should be brought. Okay, so never miss this dimension whenever you are analyzing the parliamentary reform. The last aspect which we need to analyze with respect to parliamentary reforms is poor intellectual capital. So what does it mean? So poor intellectual capital means that the most of the MPs have limited or no research staff. So leaving them that there is no expert analysis, in-house advices are not being given, so research on bills is not happening. So there is no in-house expertise, there is lack of research staff. In fact, if we analyze the parliament's LAR dis, so what is this LAR dis? LARRDIS. It is Parliament's Library and Reference Research Documentation and Information Service. So this service, yes, it is one of the service. So this service currently has sanctioned a strength of 231 staff, 231 staffers, but it employs only 176. So the research staff, according in this service, the capacity is 231, but at present there are 176 only. So that is about 8% of the total strength of the Lok Sabha Secretariat. Now you just analyze that how the research analysis will happen, expertise will happen, discussion will happen. So they won't be able to supply any input to the MPs. So this way MPs are having limited or no research staff. Okay. So best practices, if we analyze, then we have this Congressional Research Service, which is a part of Library of US Congress. So this Congressional Research Service, it employs, they have almost 600 employees, 600 people, of which 400 policy analysts are there, attorneys are there, sectoral experts are there. Okay, so they do in-depth research and analyze the issues. So what way forward we can suggest that the Parliament should offer dedicated fund to hire research team for MPs. All the MPs, there should be in-house experts. Okay, and Parliament should also invest in this intellectual capital. So investing in intellectual capital is important because ultimately they are going to provide base, they are going to provide support, points, research, analysis, alternatives to the MPs. Then only these MPs can discuss. We already know, we have already seen another issue of criminalization of politics. So that video is also there whenever we are talking about electoral reform. So you go through that video. So that also comes under the aspect of parliamentary reform. So other than this video, there are two videos on anti-defection and electoral reforms where we have discussed about criminalization of politics, muscle power, money power. Now you just imagine if such people are coming and representing the they are doing our representation, they are becoming MPs and MLAs. Do you think they will have that intellectual capital? So we need to invest in intellectual capital so that this research team at least should help these MPs and MLAs. Okay, so this is with all the issues. This was the last issue, and we have parallelly discussed the way forward, but still we will discuss few points. And with respect to these specific points, we have already discussed. So let's understand the way forward. Other than the reforms, whatever we have discussed parallelly on every slide with respect to every issue, there are certain other points which you can write. So you can write about a suggestion of parliamentary budget office like it is there in US. So US Congressional Budget Office is there, and the purpose is that this independent and impartial institution will be devoted to conduct technical and objective analysis of any bill with related to spending or revenue raising requirements. So other countries also have such institutions. Even Kenya, South Africa, Morocco, Ghana, Thailand, even they have such offices, independent and impartial institutions. Second point, you can also talk about improved representation. However, we have discussed with respect to women. So you talk about representation, balanced representation from all the states and all the sections. Considering India's case, we have a lot of diversity. So based on population, the representation should improve. Also, in last, you talk about Parliament is a place for policy, not politics. So it should discuss policy. We need to undertake reforms to ensure that it is it should be able to do true representation of people. Okay, so this is it with today's discussion. It was quite holistic, in depth, and trust me, after this you don't need any material. So if you are thorough with today's understanding, and if you have gone through the notes, handwritten notes, which we are going to provide in the Telegram channel, so do subscribe to our Telegram channel if you have not. There we are providing the handwritten notes. So after watching the video and going through the handwritten notes, you don't need anything. Just keep revising. Otherwise, in search of material, you will go here and there, and you won't be able to remember these points. So we have discussed quality points today, and these are very important points which you should keep in mind. And don't miss whenever any question comes on this topic. Okay. So hope you enjoyed. Revise well. We will meet tomorrow with another issue, another topic. Take care. Bye bye.